Welcome, Kevin McAuliffe, to the 20s from filmmakingwebinars.com. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Well, thank you for having me back once again.
I know, this is what, your 20th time? Well, it's not that many, but how many times have you done this? I think like
this is probably
7,
about
right?
6 or 7, probably.
Yeah, something like that. Well, it's always a pleasure to have you here.
Well,
and as you know, but for the new audience, in this section, which we call a conversation with our presenters, we like to find out a bit about you, your life, and how you got to be where you are today. So why don't you start out by telling us, give us a little background about yourself.
Me, my life, and how I got here. Wow, and I'll give you all that in about 30 seconds here. Well, basically, I've been an editor for about 13 or 14 years now, probably a little bit more than that. And basically, I started as an assistant. I was the guy doing all the digitizing work in the night shift. You know, got the first break to jump in and be the editor, and kind of went from there. And I kind of pride myself on being a little bit of a jack of all trades. I'm the Final Cut guy. I'm the Avid guy. I'm the After Effects guy. I'm the the motion guy. I'm the guy whoever they need to be. Because obviously, the more tools you know, the more marketable you become. So I try to make myself as marketable as possible.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because my next question was going to be, how do you stay marketable? I mean, how do you compete against so many people that have so much access to such cool technology at a low price barrier today?
I always joke, and I always use the Star Wars analogy, which is what did Han Solo say? It's all just a bunch of simple tricks and nonsense.
Right.
Well, you know what? In a lot of cases, it's having the equal balance. It's knowing what you know. Whether you're a Final Cut person, whether you're an Avid person, and that's only half of it, because the other half is knowing how to deal with the person sitting beside you. Because guess what? The day that's going to come that computer is going to crash, and if you can't keep that client happy, with your personable skills, as well as your technical know-how to get the system back up and running, they're going to go somewhere else.
So knowing a lot really is staying on the latest trends and technologies is really very important.
Totally. It's coming to these webinars. It's following the different people on Twitter. It's like
Right.
I actually get a little bit nervous, because I actually see a couple of the Creative Cow presenters here, the Final Cut, I'll call them experts, watching this. So, for me, it's always one of those things where I can only hope that I can present what I'm presenting, and hopefully it's one of those things where when I present, I hope that everybody can walk away with at least one thing that they remember. I mean, obviously, we have the on-demand version. It's going to be free, but if you can walk away with one great tip that you can go to and use, that the client's going to turn around and say, wow, that's really great, then you know what? Then I've done my job right.
Yep, definitely. So how do you stay creative? Because we've settled that we need to be technologically savvy, technical, right? We need to be that, but we also need to be creative, because we are in the creative industry. So how do you stay creative? What tips do you recommend for people to, stay on the forefront creativity-wise?
You know what? It's get out there. It's watch the tutorials. It's watch these webinars. I mean, because like I said, I'm going to be throwing out, and it's one of these things where we're going to be looking at a bunch of different products from different companies today. And, you're going to look at it and say, well, I don't know if that's one for me. But guess what? It's one of those, color grading is color grading is color grading. It's the same no matter, what application, no matter what tool you're using to get the job done. Essentially, a lot of the color grading is your eyes and knowing what to look for when you're color grading. It's what's appealing to you. And then if you know what's appealing to you and you have a tool in front of you, you can easily figure it out from there simply by getting in and playing around. And with webinars like this, it's one of those you can, if a client says, I'd really like to have this look, you can go, you know what, I saw that in that film grading webinar or the color grading webinar. I know what plugin will do the trick for that. And then it's one of those, guess what, if the client's coming in to spend thousands of dollars and you can then justify spending $100 or $200 on something, guess what? You can give them exactly what they want. You've paid for that plugin now. And now you can then go and make even more money off it by doing different color grading techniques, obviously for different clients.
Right. So from a color grading perspective, do you feel the colorist or the editor, because most people are editor/colorist, be involved in the pre-production process even before they get the footage to color grade and edit?
It's always, as an editor, I mean, and it's very rare these days. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's obviously still people out there that just do color grading, but these days, now it's more so like people like me. I'm the editor, I'm the audio guy, I'm the, the motion graphics guy, I'm the color grading guy.
Right.
It's just a matter of, getting there, and I'll give you a quick example. I had a client that went out and they shot a whole bunch of stuff in the wintertime up north in Canada, and they came back and everything was blue. They said, oh, we wanted to go with that really cold feel. And I said, no, your cameraman didn't know how to white balance the camera.
Right.
Now I have to go in and I have to color correct. But it's one of those things where, you have a conversation. What camera are you shooting with? What format are you shooting in? Understanding that, if they're shooting in DVC Pro HD, there's a lot of inherent compression with DVC Pro HD. Are you aware of that when you come back? It's just a matter of getting as much information as you can so you can do as much research as you need to, whether it's stuff like importing footage, whether it's understanding what compression is going on with the footage. It just makes it so that there's no surprises for you in the edit room when they come back.
Yeah, so it really is important to be involved in that pre-production process.
Yeah, as much as you can be. I mean, considering you're probably there editing and audio mixing and motion graphicing and all that type of stuff.
Right. So what's the most used file format today? Because there are tons of different file formats, and obviously we're always looking for standards, but that ain't going to happen. So what's the most used file format currently today?
But believe it or not, the one thing that I've actually seen a huge swing towards, believe it or not, is ProRes. Only now with the inclusion of ProRes, being able to be used on Windows, I see a lot of ProRes files coming across my desk only because it seems to be one of those type of files that, like DVC Pro HD kind of has been written off because, Windows people have problems with that. It's one of those, ProRes seems to be one that seems to be a really good quality and one that's easily transferable right across the board.
I see. Yep. Makes a lot of sense. Well, very cool, Kevin. I know you have to get ready for the webinar, which will start in just a couple of minutes. So talk to you soon.
Thanks, you.
Well, welcome everyone to our show, Color Grading Advanced Techniques inside Final Cut Pro 10, presented by Kevin McAuliffe. I am your host, Marcelo Lewin, and the goal of our webinar today is to show you how to use the FxFactory plugins inside of Final Cut Pro 10 to create stunning color grades. For those of you that are new to our webinars, they last approximately 90 minutes. We take the first 10 minutes to thank our sponsors, go through some logistics, and introduce our presenter. Then 60 minutes is reserved for the main presentation, finally ending with prize giveaways and around 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A. During the webinar, please feel free to post questions. You have a question box right in front of you. They will be moderated and answered during Q&A. After the webinar, please make sure you fill out the survey. It helps us in knowing how we are doing. You will also receive an email about the on-demand webinar tomorrow. And finally, feel free to provide any feedback to us, good or bad. Just email feedback@filmmakingwebinars.com. Please do not record this webinar. It is being recorded on our end and will be offered later on as an on-demand webinar with lots of bonus material. We have some great prizes to give away today. Winners will be picked randomly from the attendance list. You must be present in the webinar to win, and we know if you are here because we have a full list of who's currently online. To claim the prize, winners will be introduced to the company providing the prize via email by the end of the day today. The company providing the prize is in charge of shipping the prize directly to you. And finally, any questions you have regarding the prize should be addressed directly to the company providing it. Your presenter today is Kevin P. McAuliffe. Kevin is a senior editor at MyJo, working in HD post-production in Toronto, Canada. He has been in the television industry for over 13 years and cuts on the latest versions of Avid, Media Composer, and Apple's Final Cut Pro, and has been working with After Effects since version 3.5 and Motion for 5 years. His current clients include Warner Brothers, Paramount Pictures, Walt Disney Pictures, and others. He loves to hear from you. Please feel free to email him or follow him on Twitter at KPMcAuliffe. I'm your host, Marcelo Lewin. I'm also the founder of FilmmakingWebinars.com. Prior to this company, I created 2 other companies, including Pixelheads Network in 2008 and MyInternetDesktop.com in 2000. I've also worked for other companies, including Walt Disney Imagineering, Toyota, NBC.com, plus others, creating and managing large-scale digital media projects. Love to hear from you. Please feel free to email me, Marcelo, at filmmakingwebinars.com. For those of you that are new to filmmakingwebinars.com, we teach the art, science, and business of filmmaking. Filmmakers are our only focus, and our topics are for professionals working in film, video, and the web. Our presenters are working industry professionals that have a passion for filmmaking and love to share that passion with you. Our offerings include free live webinars, on-demand webinars, 5-step tutorials, and ebooks designed for and by digital filmmakers. We also have a very popular blog written by our presenters and the Digital Filmmakers Podcast, which is also available on iTunes. You can check it all out at filmmakingwebinars.com. Now it's time for our poll. We would like to know what your current color correction workflow looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll and go ahead and click on what your current color correction workflow is. And let's go ahead and close the poll, and we'll share the results. And it looks like the majority of you are doing it inside of Final Cut Pro 10 with the color board. Very cool. You're going to learn some really cool techniques and about some really cool plugins as well. So excellent. We'll continue on with our presentation. Make sure you follow Filmmaking Dude and tweet that you are checking out the color grading advanced techniques in Final Cut Pro 10 webinar. Don't forget to use the hashtag #FilmmakingWebinars. That's how we'll know who's tweeted. At the end of the day today, 2 random followers will be picked, and each one will win 1 on-demand webinar from us, so good luck. Also, remember to like us on Facebook. You'll get lots of information about our webinars, podcasts, blog articles, plus much more. Just go to facebook.com/filmmakingwebinars. Finally, before we start our feature presentation, I'd like to thank our sponsors, since it is thanks to them that we are able to offer these live webinars for free, along with some great prizes. So thank you to Noise Industries, our sponsor this week. Noise Industries is an innovative developer of visual effects tools for the post-production and broadcast community. Their products are integrated with popular nonlinear editing and compositing products from Apple and Adobe. You can find out more about them at noiseindustries.com.
Thank you, Marcelo. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to be sort of covering a lot in this webinar. And I hope one thing that you're going to take away from it, we've called it advanced color grading, but to be perfectly honest, in my opinion, anything more than just taking a preset and dragging it and dropping it onto a clip is essentially, advanced color grading. A lot of people will just take clips, that have been, cameramen have gone out and shot. So pardon me, camera people, because obviously men and women can be directors of photography. They'll bring the footage back, they'll take it, they'll drop it into their timeline, and they'll say, okay, this looks great, and they'll put it onto tape. The only problem is that as I always say, and as I always teach people, that every shot, whether you think it needs it or not, needs some kind of either color correction or color grading done to it. Because guess what? Unless you have a shoot that's going to be happening, let's say over the span of an entire day, and people know that, you're obviously going to want to correct things so that things look very similar. Because guess what? You might start shooting something at, let's say, 10 in the morning. You don't wrap up shooting until, let's say, 4 in the afternoon. Well, guess what? If you're shooting outside, the sun has changed everything inside of your shoot. So you're going to need to get in, because obviously, if this this entire scene you're shooting is taking place over a span of 5 minutes in your show, you're going to want to make sure that everything looks the same and not like it actually took place over about 6 hours that was shot outside. So I hope a lot of the stuff that I'm going to show you in here, although stuff might seem simple, the results that you're going to get are very, very powerful and very, very cool, and is really going to add a new level of looks to the work that you're doing. And the first thing that I got to point out before we even start is that I'm actually just going to hide my events over here for 1 second, because since we are talking about color correction and color grading, there's obviously an important tool that you need to use, and I'm not referring to the color board. We'll get to the color board in just a second. What I'm actually referring to is located right up here. I'm just going to click on the drop down, and of course I am referring to the video scopes. Color correcting without the video scopes is essentially like getting in your car and closing your eyes and sticking that car and drive and just driving all over town, because unless you're actually looking at what's going on inside of your scopes, you're really going to be lost. And I only say that because at the end of the day, what's going to happen, you're going to take your show, you're going to output it to tape, or you're going to export it from Final Cut Pro 10, you're going to send it off to go to air, and it's going to get rejected, because these days, it's actually not a person that's watching your show anymore. It's a computer that analyzes the video levels. And if you're not in there watching exactly what is going on, then you're really going to be lost very quickly, because what's going to happen is that your show is going to get sent back and it's going to say rejected. Okay, well, why was it rejected? Because your video levels are too hot. Where? Throughout your show. So having this window open pretty much all the time while you're color grading is very, very important. Now, the only issue that I run into here is that because my screen is shrunk down, I'm going to be sort of opening it and closing it as I go. But obviously, depending on the computer you're working on, you might have a very large monitor. I encourage you to keep your scopes open as much as you can so that you can see what's going on. And in most cases, you'll be dealing with two scopes. The waveform, obviously, for your video levels, brights and darks, and you're going to be dealing with vector scope for color. But for right now, I'm just going to actually turn it off here for 1 second. Let's just hide our video scopes. And what I want to do is just talk about a basic color grade. So let's talk about a basic color grade. I'm actually just going to remove this shot from my timeline for just 1 second here. I actually have a couple things that I want to show you. First, we're just going to do a basic color correction. And this is something that I pretty much do, to all of my footage. And I call it a color correction, but I'd actually probably refer to it as a color grade because I'm really not correcting anything. I'm just going to turn the skimming tool on here for 1 second. You'll see I have a shot from Digital Juice's Video Tracks HD right here. And I would consider this to be a very good-looking shot. And what I've also done is I've actually come in and I've given us I'll call it a typical situation. How many typical situations have you run into like this where your footage comes back blue? I can probably put my hand up and say, more times than I can count on all my fingers and toes, times 50. So let's take this shot. Let's just do a basic color correction on this shot here. And I'm going to show you how this plays out across all of the different shots that I happen to have inside this event. What I'm going to do is just take the clip, drag it, and drop it into my timeline. I'm just going to navigate right back here. I'm just going to turn skimming off because I don't want to be skimming through that. And let's get in and let's do a basic color correction. Now what I'm going to do here is just swing back here into the inspector because obviously a couple ways that we can get to the color board. One way is with the clip obviously selected. We can navigate right over here to our drop down and you'll see it right here, show color board. How I normally get to it since I have the inspector pretty much open all the time is I can actually just click on the little right arrow on the correction line just to swing out the old color board right there. And you're going to see that we have three tabs. We have the color tab, we have the saturation tab, and we have the exposure tab. Now in most cases I really ignore the color tab and the saturation tab, and what I actually deal with is the exposure tab. And I'm just going to come back here a little bit. We'll come to about here. And what I like to do is I normally come in and for me, sort of the sign of how things were shot and exposure is really in the blacks. Now this is actually pretty good here, but you can see my blacks aren't exactly as black as I would necessarily like them to be. So what I normally like to do is just come in and I'll just crush the blacks ever so slight. And you can see that also by doing that, what I'm also doing is giving these shadows a more defined look. We'll just bring that down a little bit. Then what I like to do is just bring my mids up ever so slightly. Just bring the blacks down a little bit. Very nice. And depending on how the whites are doing, I'm just going to bring those down as well. Just like that. I'm just going to step back here into the inspector, and just for the purposes of what we're doing, I'm going to open the scopes. And since we're dealing with exposure, I'm actually going to navigate up to the settings. We'll turn the waveform on here for a second, because you can see right now, by bringing those whites down, I've actually crushed them below 0. So that's obviously something that I want to keep in mind. So I'm obviously showing this to you because in most cases, what we would want to what we would want to do is make sure that our blacks aren't that crushed. But for the purposes of me going through this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to crush the blacks to create a look. And then we can worry about cropping them off later. So what I'm going to do is just bring back my scopes here. Let's actually just hide them again here. And I'm just going to bring this back the way I had it, just like that. Because now what we've essentially done is created a very different look. Let me just zoom back here, hit Command and minus. We've created a very different look. I'll just give it a little bit of a play here. Now, obviously, depending on your connection on your end, this might look a little bit choppy. But let's take a look at the before and the after. This is obviously the after. Let's just zoom in. And we'll just swing back here into the inspector. This is the before. You can see, even before when we looked at it, it actually looked pretty good. But now when you look at it, you can see it actually may have been a little bit washed out, but you can see now we've defined these shadows. We've really gotten in, and these whites actually look nice and white, and the darks are actually starting to look really nice as well. Now, obviously, the only thing we'd need to take into consideration in this shot is the fact that I did crush those blacks. So depending on how much I crush them, I'd need to obviously check out the video scope, or pardon me, I'd need to check out the waveform monitor to make sure that my blacks aren't below safe levels. But like I said, I'm pretty happy with this correction the way that it is now. So let's go on and let's talk about a common situation. Like I said, this is probably, if there's one situation that you're going to run into more than anything, it's this one. And it's the camera person, director of photography, brings back a shot that is blue, just like this. Now, I'm going to be honest with you right now because I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. Coming from Final Cut Pro 7 to Final Cut Pro 10, I am not a fan of the color board. And the only reason that I'm not a fan of the color board at all is because, in my opinion, the color correction tool inside of Final Cut Pro was probably one of, I'll say, the simplest and best ones that really was in any editing application out there. It was so simple to use, and it did such a great job. Now, not saying that you can't get in and do some great corrections with the color board, but in here, this is a situation where what we would normally just do is, oh, okay, look, everything is kind of, blue. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this clip, we'll bring it into our timeline, and normally what we do with those color wheels is we would simply eyedrop colors. Let me just turn skimming off here. I can see white back here. Let me just get a little bit of a better shot. Here we go. I see white here, I see black here, and in most cases, that's really the only two that I need to worry about. The grays is great because I actually happen to have a lot of gray in my shot, so I could simply take the eyedropper, I could eyedrop, I could take the eyedropper and eyedrop the black, and then I could eyedrop the gray, and guess what? We're good to go. We obviously don't have that luxury inside of Final Cut Pro 10. So let me just show you how I sort of work around things inside of Final Cut Pro 10 to correct a shot like this. What we're going to do again is we're going to come back to correction. Again, a couple ways to get to it. We can come to the drop-down, show color board. Or maybe I'll just do it that way, sure. And in this case, we're going to be dealing with color. And you're going to come over here and you're going to see that we have these 4 buttons that are sitting here inside the color board. And they're actually fairly self-explanatory. The first one, the largest one, is the global parameter. And this is if we wanted to get in and add, let's say in this case, green to the entire shot. This is to the highlights, midtones, and shadows. Okay, I'm just going to undo what I just did here to set everything back. And what if I only wanted to get in and adjust the shadows? I'm going to just take the black target here and swing it around. And you can see what a difference it really makes over here in the trees, because we got a lot of black in the trees. You can see how that really starts to change things. You can see the same thing, obviously, with the midtones. Where does this come into play? Take a look at the road. You can see the road really changing there. And last but certainly not least, obviously, the highlights. Now, in this case, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to take a look at, because I'm taking a look at this, and where I'm seeing most of the problems coming in is actually right here inside the highlights. So let's take a look at highlights first, and let's see if we can actually fix the highlights. Now, how I normally like to look at things is I'm taking a look at this, I'm going, you know what, this is looking a little bit blue. Now, if you take a look up here at our color wheel, you can see we got blue on one side of the color wheel, and directly on the other side of the color wheel, we have yellow. So using that reasoning, we can probably assume that if we took the highlights and we dragged them towards yellow, that we might be able to fix this problem. So let's take a look and see if that actually works. What I'm going to do is just take the highlights over here. I'm going to drag them right over here towards yellow. And what I'm going to do is just start adding yellow back into the shot. And you can see that by adding a little bit of yellow back into the shot, we've actually done a pretty good job of correcting that. And how we can see that is to simply come back and turn the color off. Now let's see what's going on here. There we go. Turn the color off. You see very blue. Turn the color on. And we've added a little bit of yellow back in, but it's actually made a big difference inside this shot. And what we can now do is just swing back in here to our correction. And I'm going to come back here to the exposure, and we'll just do a little bit of our crush the blacks, bring the mids up, bring the highlights down. And what we've actually done is taken a shot that in most cases people might say is not really usable, and made it a great looking shot. Now let's talk about doing a color grade using the color board. And this is one that I like to do here. And what I'm going to do again is just delete this shot here. And let's navigate back up here to our Video Tracks HD shot. I'll just take it, drag it here into my timeline. And again, it's my guy swinging around the corner here because I'm taking a look at this. It looks like the sun is starting to go down, but it doesn't really look like sort of that 4 or 5 o'clock, almost that dusk time that you'd want to have. So let's take a look at how we could actually get in and fix this. And not necessarily fix it, but let's see how we can get in and grade this to give it the look that we're going to want to do. Here's a little trick that I like to do with a shot like this. What I actually like to do is I'm going to select the shot again. We're going to come back to our color board, and I'm actually going to bypass color altogether because I'm kind of happy with the way the color looks in this. And I'm going to jump right to exposure. Again, I'm going to do the exact same thing I did before, crush the blacks a bit, bring the mids up, bring the highlights down a little bit. And this is something that you'll see me do. When people see me color correct, they'll actually see me go to this first and do this a lot of the time, because it just creates a very strong separation between white and black. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to step back to saturation. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull a lot of the saturation out of the darks in this shot. I'm just going to pull it out like such, right down to about there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the mids right back up, and I'm going to bring the highlights right back up. And you can see by bringing the highlights up, what I've actually done is this road has now turned more of an orange color. So let's go back and let's take a look at what I had before. I'm just going to step back here. That's what I had before. And this is what I have now. And you can see that by basically taking that saturation and increasing it, we've actually almost changed the time of day in this shot. It's almost later in the day. And what we can even do is just step back here. I can even bring that up even more here. Just like that. Bring it up even more. And we'll just come back. And you can see that we've created just a very simple color grade, but a very effective one to essentially change the time of day that this was shot at. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, you picked this shot, specifically, how do we get in and, can we get in and color grade other shots the same way? Well, why don't we try it? Let's just delete the shot from our timeline. I'll just take the surfing dude here. Why not? Let's create a cool look or a grade with our surfing guy here. I'm just going to select him again. I'll just come back to the color board this way. And again, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Exposure, I'll just bring down a little bit, bring the mids up a little bit, bring the highlights down a little bit. I'm going to come back to saturation again. Again, I'm going to pull a lot out of the darks in this shot. And what I'm going to do is crank the mids up, and I'm going to crank the highlights up. Why am I cranking the highlights up? Because guess what? I'm getting a lot of information back in his shorts and in the board. Now what I'd probably do here is just bring the shadows down again a little bit. Maybe bring the mids up slightly. And let's step back, and you can see now that again, we've created a very different look with this shot. You can see we've got a lot more detail in the waves, and what I'd probably do here is just come back, and we'll come back to saturation. I'll just pull even more saturation out of the shadows, and you can see, again, a very cool look. You see these type of looks done all the time. It's almost like a bleach bypass effect. We've bleached a lot of the water. The water obviously used to be a bit more of a blue color, but we've bleached a lot of that out. But we've left some color inside the pants and in the red of the surfboard. And really, I may have explained that in 5 minutes, but really to create something like that should really only take you a second. Now, there's something else that I want to point out. What I'm going to do is just delete the shot here, because believe it or not, you actually already have a bunch of color grades at your disposal that you might not even know are there. What I'm going to do is just take this shot, drag it down into my timeline again. You can see I've actually already got the color board open. You're going to notice I've got the little drop down right here. I'm going to click on the drop down, and you can see that I have a whole bunch of different presets in here. And I even have the ability to save my own. And you'll see, like, for example, let's say I wanted moonlight. There's a moonlight color grade right there. Dropped right on immediately. And what I had also done here, I'm just going to delete this clip, was for my color correction. If you go out and let's say, your director of photography shoots a whole ton of stuff and it all comes back the same, and you want to add that very cool color grade that I showed you, what you can actually do is just navigate right over. And I saved one right down here called BMX, and I'm simply going to select it, and we now have a very different color grade for this shot. And if you take a look, if I come back up, it's got that correction that I needed to the highlights. It's got the shadows saturation drop down, mids and highlights brought right back up, and it's got that color correction done. And you can see just the pop that's coming from these guys' clothing. Just looks really, really cool. A very oversaturated look. You'll see, stuff like this, in certain Hollywood movies where we get lots of oversaturation. But the great thing is that even with the oversaturation, we still have lots of detail, lots of fine edges. So it looks very, very nice. Okay, so that's, sort of an introduction, and really what's important to keep in mind as I'm talking is that really I can only do an introduction to all of the things I'm going to show you here, only because we only have an hour and I'm going to be talking about a lot of things. So I encourage you to take some of the techniques I'm showing you, take them and use them as a starting point to expand on, take them and play around with them. Because now what we're going to do is we're going to step outside of, well, not really step outside of Final Cut Pro 10, but what we're going to do is we're going to sidestep, because now we're not going to be talking about built-in features of Final Cut Pro 10 anymore. We're going to talk about some great tools from Noise Industries that you can use inside of your workflow. And the first thing I need to obviously do to talk about Noise Industries is I want to actually talk about FxFactory. Now, what's important to keep in mind about Noise Industries is that Noise Industries has their own plugin package called, appropriately enough, FxFactory Pro, which you see that I'm in now. But Noise Industries also has partner plugins, and partner plugins are obviously plugins that are designed by partner companies, of which we're going to see a few of them today. And they are obviously included here, as you can see, inside of the FxFactory application. So when you install FxFactory, you're actually going to get a free trial of all of these different plugins. And we're going to be dealing with a few of them today. Now, what I wanted to do is I just wanted to introduce you to the FxFactory application and just show you a couple things in here before we move on. Obviously, you can see that right up at the top, we have the option of Final Cut Pro 10, Final Cut Pro 7, Motion, and After Effects. But what's important to keep in mind is that when you buy, let's just use Yano Box Moods as an example. When you buy Moods, it's available in Final Cut Pro 10, Final Cut Pro 7, Motion, and After Effects. You actually get it for all of the applications, which is great depending on your workflow. If you happen to be in After Effects and you want to just throw it on there, great, throw it on there. If you happen to be editing, you want to throw it on there, go for it. So what's also important to keep in mind is that you'll see, appropriately enough at the top here, I happen to have Yano Box, is that you'll see that I can actually navigate right over top of Moods, and I can actually click on Info. And once I'm in here, you'll see that I can actually navigate over Moods, and I can actually get the help file right from here, and it's going to open Firefox in this case. Or what I can actually do is I'll just quit out of Firefox. I can actually come back over and get a tutorial right from here. So you don't need to go hunting, try to find if is it yanobox.com, yanobox.net. You can actually come right into FxFactory Pro and get all of this great information right from within the FxFactory Pro interface. What I also like to do is that if I happen to only be a Final Cut Pro 10 user, what I like to do is just come in and just say, well, you know what, just show me the Final Cut Pro 10 plugins, and there they are, just like that. Now, since I did mention Yano Box Moods, why don't we talk about Moods first? What we're going to do here is I'm just going to quit out of FxFactory Pro, because I don't need FxFactory Pro anymore, and just show me the events here. And I'm just going to come to my Moods, and I've got some great bike racing footage. I'm not sure if it's called Moto. I think that's, I play video games, and that's what the game is always called, Moto 2012 or whatever we're at. So I think I'm going to use this footage here as a starting point, because I really like it. It's really cool looking footage. It looks like it's kind of shot in the salt flats, in the United States. It looks very cool. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick one here. Let's just pick this one here to work with. I'm just going to hit S on the keyboard to turn skimming off. I'll drag it down here into my timeline. And of course, what we're going to do is navigate right over here. One thing I love right now, Yano Box, last in the list. Save the best for last. Just kidding. Because all these plugins that we're going to show today are great. But Yano Box, very easy to find. Why? Because obviously it's down at the end of the alphabet. And one thing that you're going to notice right away is you get Moods right here at the top. But one thing that I actually really like about Moods is the fact that the team at Yano Box knows that the preset thing is not really working inside of Final Cut Pro 10. So what they've done is just given me the presets as their own separate effects right here. And we've got 37 presets that we can actually come in and apply. And obviously applying the presets is simple. We just take the preset, drag it, and drop it on here. Done. Okay? But let's just undo what we just did, because we actually want to create a grade. We want to create a look inside of Final Cut Pro 10 using Yano Box Moods. So what I'm going to do is just come back to the inspector, come back up here to the top to Moods. Let's take Moods here. We'll take it, drag it over here. I'm going to drop it onto my clip. You're going to see what happens is as soon as I drop it on my clip, I'm just going to hide the events here. And we'll just see if we can drag this window over. No, I can't drag it over anymore. That's okay, though. You'll see that as soon as I apply Moods and I select it, what's going to happen is, let's just try that again here. Let's select it. There we go. We now have these color wheels inside of Final Cut Pro 10. And this is one thing that I really like about Moods. I get my color wheels back, which for me, when I'm color correcting, the color wheels are so easy to use just because they give you a visual representation of what you're attempting to do. Now you're going to see over here inside the inspector, very first option is, appropriately enough, display overlays. So I'm actually just going to turn it off for a second just so you can see that we can actually turn that off. And if I deselect things here, we can actually just come through and see what our grade looks like. Now we obviously haven't created a grade yet, but we're going to in just a second. I'm just going to select the clip again here. And let's come up. I'm going to turn the overlays on. And I love this feature, the help card. I'm going to turn the help card on. Why? Because the help card is going to tell us, first of all, what these things actually do. But you're going to notice that we got some arrows, top and bottom, left and right, on certain ones, which is going to tell me, for example, let's just come back here a little bit, that, and I'll just use the one on the far left-hand side, that if I want to desaturate this shot, what I'm going to do is actually take the target here, and I'm simply going to drag it up. And by dragging it up, I desaturate the shot. If I want to add silver in for a bleach bypass, I simply drag down. So you can see that obviously if I wanted to adjust the brightness, what we're going to do is just drag back. We're obviously affecting the darks here. Other way as well. So that's affecting the shadows. If I want to affect exposure, drag up, drag down. And we've got the, oh, pardon me, to adjust the gamma, drag up, drag down, midtones, exposure, highlights, left and right. So you can see a very clever way to work inside of Final Cut Pro 10. One that I haven't really seen it in any other plugin, whether it's Final Cut Pro 10 or otherwise. It's a very cool way to work. And what's important to keep in mind is that what I'm showing you is the same across the different applications. So After Effects, it's the same. Motion, it's the same. Final Cut Pro 7, it's the same. So let's get in and let's create a basic grade. Now, one thing that I've done now is I've obviously gone in and adjusted the gamma / exposure and the brightness and the desaturate. So I just want to reset those here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to come in here. I'm just going to right click. We'll just reset the parameters. Actually, what we'll do is we'll just reset everything here. Just back to the way we had the effect when we applied it. And what I'm going to do here is just turn the help card on. And let's do a color grade. So let's just bring our shot down here. And looking at this shot, and this is what I had talked about before, a lot of color grading it has nothing to do with the color wheels or the tool you're using. It's taking a look at the shot and figuring out what you want to do. And what I want to do with this shot is I actually want to give it sort of a very bluish kind of look. And for me, right now, looking at this shot, I already know instantly what I'm going to need to get in and adjust. I'm going to need to get in and adjust the midtones. Now, how do I know that? Well, take a look. I know the road is gray. The gravel is a very grayish color. The background, even though it's brown, still gray. The background, a very, very sort of mid-tone color. So I know that if I get in and I adjust these midtones by simply getting in and dragging the element or dragging the target here in whichever direction I want to go, you'll see as soon as I start dragging it towards red, it gives everything a very red look to it. And you can see that what I can do is simply twirl the wheel around. Now I said I want to go towards blue, so let's do that. Maybe we'll give it sort of an end of day type of look. You can see I've now created a very different look simply by taking the midtones. And the great thing is it's a very visual, like I said, a very visual plugin. By simply taking that midtone and dragging it this way, you can see what change we've done to this shot. Very different. I'm just going to turn the help cards and the overlays off. Turn that off and on. You can see very different. Let's just turn things back on here. And what I normally like to do when I do something like this, I'm just going to zoom in on my shot here just for 1 second, is once I take the midtones and drag them sort of all the way out to the edge, now that's way too much, what I like to do is actually take my highlights and send them back the other direction. So just in case there's a little bit of crossover, I'm sort of compensating it for it by going one way with one slider and the other way with the highlights. And you can see now that even still, a very different look. And what I also like to do here is I like to come in, I'm just going to zoom back again here, is get in and do a color correction to this shot as well. Now what I probably should have done here, let's do our color correction first. So what I'm going to do is just turn my help card on here. Now again, much like I had done with the standard color board, we can get in and correct this very quickly. So what I'm going to do here is let's adjust the blacks. I'm going to take the blacks, we're going to grab our target, I'm just going to bring it a bit to the left, crush the blacks a little bit. What I'm going to do then is we're going to bring the mids or the gamma up here just a little bit. And I'm going to adjust the exposure by bringing the whites down a little bit. And obviously by dragging in a diagonal, I'm now bringing the exposure down and bringing the mids up a little bit, just like such. And you can see it's just a little, it's a very minor enhancement, but it actually helps things stand out. And you can see back here in the background with the Yamaha Championships, as soon as I turn that off, you can see right now it's very washed out, but as soon as I turn it back on, we're getting a very different look. Now what I like to do is once I'm happy with the way that things look, I'm going to come in again, I'm going to stick the midtones where I had them before, right over here. And let's stick the highlights back over here. Not too much, just a little bit. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to bleach this up a little bit. And how I bleach that up is very simple. I'm going to use silver. Now what I need to do here is just come down a little bit until I get the motorcycle a little bit more in the shot here. And what I'm going to do is simply grab the target and I'm just going to drag it south to add silver to the shot. Now, of course, what's important to keep in mind, and this is where you sort of have to think things through as you're going. Obviously, by adjusting the left and right position, you can see I'm adjusting the shadows. So keep that in mind when you're adding your bleach bypass to this. Now, what I always like to show people is, as I drag gently, they say, well, you're not really doing anything. So what I always do is I do it quickly. Now, if you take a look over here, this is where you're going to see the bleach really starting to come in. Watch this. You can see all of a sudden now the red is very muted from what it was before. That's what it was before. That's what it is now. So very muted. What I'm going to do now is just crush this a little bit, again, by taking it to the left. That's a bit too much, but you'll see, guess what? maybe they're racing sort of at about, the sun's starting to go down, it's not out anymore. And guess what I've done? I'll just deselect the layer here. What I've essentially done is I should have turned everything off here. Let me just select it, turn the help cards off, deselect the layer. There we go. So I've now created almost like a driving at morning type of thing. Now, what's important to keep in mind, and we actually talked about this before, is that I actually have all these rendered out as DVC Pro. And you can see, I believe these were originally shot in 2K. You can actually see how much noise is introduced into the darkest areas of the shot. You can see as I drag through, lots of noise is going on. But guess what? That's unfortunately just the inherent nature of DVC Pro HD. It's a very compressed format. But you can see to create a grade inside of Yano Box Moods is, again, very simple. And like I said, the one thing that I love about Moods is that it reintroduces the color wheels back into our workflow. Now, one other thing that I want to show you inside of Moods, and I'm just going to zoom back here, is obviously you see me coming up here constantly saying, okay, so let's talk about, let me show you what this looked like before and what this looked like after. So I'm just going to turn this off for a second. Okay, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to turn this on again. But what if I didn't want, what if I didn't want that? What if I wanted to show the client exactly how this looked before and after? Well, no problem. You're going to notice that I actually have another target wheel over here that I can actually grab and drag over like this so that I can see the before and after. I can just zoom in now. Now, remember, like I said, because I have to shrink my screen down for the purposes of doing the webinar, normally I'd have more screen real estate to show all this to you, but now I can simply just turn this off, just like that. And if I wanted to, I could, obviously, pick whichever area of the shot I wanted to show you. And let me just turn things back on here for 1 second, and I'm just going to zoom back. And again, the great thing is that switching the grade is, again, like I said, very easy. So let's just say we want it to have, more of a red look. What I'm going to do is we're just going to go sort of over here. Can even go with more of a yellowish look. Bring our highlights back the other way. And now look what we've done. Isn't that like what your parents used to say? Look what you've done now. Look what we've done now. Created almost like, the one example that I always use with this is the movie Red Planet with Val Kilmer. This is exactly how you would do a technique like this. You're out shooting in, conceivably it looks like they're shooting in the desert. And you want to get in and you want to make this look like, you're on the planet Mars. Well, guess what? This is how you're going to get in and do that very quickly. And again, we can compare before and after. And you can see we've added red into the shot, and it's really changed the entire feel of everything that we've been doing. Let me just zoom back here just to make sure I got it all. So, like I said, Yano Box Moods, a great plugin, reintroduces the color wheel, lets you also get in and do basic color correction as well to the shadows, midtones, and highlights. And lets you also get in and do a little bleach bypassing work as well at the same time. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about the next plugin pack that we're going to be talking about, which is Naturous Levels and Curves. And Naturous Levels and Curves, again, introduces another tool that we're not accustomed to inside of Final Cut Pro 10, which is the Curves editor. And now, I know the first thing you're probably thinking, well, what exactly, curves and what does all this stuff mean? Well, basically what's going on here, let me just delete this clip that I'm working with here, and let me just open the event browser here, or the event viewer, and I'm just going to go up to Naturous Levels here. And let's take the first shot I'm going to be working with, which is this one here. We'll just take it, drag it, drop it down here into the timeline. Again, another great shot from Digital Juice's Video Tracks HD. I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit, and I'll just hide the event viewer. So let's talk about what exactly is going on as far as the color space inside of Final Cut Pro 10 goes, because whether you know it or not, you're actually working in linear light space inside of Final Cut Pro 10. And what's going to happen is once we start working with the Naturous Levels and Curves effects, is we're actually going to be switching over to film log space. Now, I know that this, I'm not going to get into too much detail about this because it can get, pretty technical, but basically what this is giving us is fine tonal control over our shots. And I want to show you, curves is always one thing that scares people away, even in a program like After Effects. And I would just want to get in and just show you that, the curves, the Naturous Curves effects, when you see how powerful they are, it's really, I'm going to call it, one of my go-to effects, because it's going to be something that I'm going to go to all the time. And the first thing I do want to point out about curves, let me just actually come back up here. Obviously, we can find Naturous right here. You'll see that we have the 4 effects in here. We have curves, curves luma, curves RGB, and curves levels. And I'm actually going to be showing you 3 of these effects in here, and one of them I'm actually going to use to do an actual color correction. So let's talk about curves luma first, because I'm looking at this shot here that I have, and I have these great-looking Steven Spielberg God rays, as I like to call them. And the reason I call them Steven Spielberg God rays is because the look sort of became famous from E.T. And my only problem is that this shot doesn't look as ominous as I want it to. I want these clouds to be really dark, and I want these beams to stand out. And it's really not doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use the curves luma effect. Now, one thing that I want to point out, you'll notice as soon as I come over for the preview, that all I get is this line in the middle of the screen. Well, that doesn't really seem like a good effect. Well, what this actually is the curves line. And I'm going to show you how this is going to work in just a second. What I'm going to do is actually take this effect, I'm going to drag it over here, and I'm going to drop it onto the shot in my timeline. And you're going to notice I get a very basic window over here that basically just gives me the option of adjusting the black, the toe, the mid, the knee, and the white. Now, one thing that I should point out before I go on is that as of right now, presets are not supported for the Naturous effects inside of Final Cut Pro 10, but I just happened to leave After Effects open here. And I just left curves RGB up here. I'm just going to drag and drop it over here, and you'll see that inside of After Effects, we actually have access to presets inside of After Effects. So I just wanted to mention that to you, that obviously, you know, there's some people out there like myself that actually have all of the different applications, and I'm going to be using it in different situations. So keep that in mind, that you do have access to presets inside of Adobe's After Effects. And you also actually have access to the help menu as well. Now I'm just going to quit out of After Effects because I just wanted to show you that inside After Effects. Because we're talking about Final Cut Pro 10, we're not talking about After Effects here, so we're not going to talk about After Effects anymore. But basically what I want to do is, again, I just want to come in. I'm just going to minimize here for a second. And I want to basically do a color grade to this shot here. And all I'm really going to do is I'm going to adjust the points in between black and mid and white. And those are here referred to as the toe, right down here, and the knee, right up here. And what we're going to do is call just a very common S-curve. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. Let's just take the toe and let's just bring it down. And you'll see what's happening here is we're actually adjusting the space, and I'm just going to zoom in here so you can see what's going on. I'm actually adjusting the light information in between the shadows and the midtones. And you can see that I can actually bring them down quite a lot. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to adjust the light in between the midtones and the highlights. So let's do that. I'm going to adjust the knee here, and let's just come over here like such. And I'm going to bring it up, and you'll see that as I do, what's happening is, take a look in here. We're not adjusting the white. We're just adjusting that area in between. And let's just bring the knee up a little bit more. Just like that. And you're going to see that we start to lose information in here. And what's important to keep in mind is that once you start losing information, then you got a problem. We're losing information up here. So all I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come to the white value, and I'm going to bring it down. And as I bring it down, you're going to see that really the only thing that's being affected here as I bring this down is the whitest part of the shot, because the knee is essentially controlling everything else, you'll see. And what's funny is that, and this is something that when I was prepping for this webinar and I was going through the footage that I was going to use, is that for me all of this footage looks great. It does. To be perfectly honest, the Digital Juice VideoTrax HD shots are great. But I want you to take a look at what it looked like before. And it's a good looking shot. We've got all the God rays. But take a look at the difference once I add curves luma to this. Look at the detail I now have inside not only the clouds, but inside the God rays as well. And you'll see that I'll do a before and after here. There's the before and there's the after. A very, very different look. This shot is now very ominous. You'll see right here, obviously brights are a little bit too high, so you're obviously going to want to correct this. Maybe not as much as I did, because I did it in the darkest part. But even still, take a look at that. And let's take a look at the before and the after. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that I can also obviously not show the curves. So that way when I do the before and after, you can see. The clouds now look like rain is actually ready to fall from them, or rain has just fallen from them. And obviously we can bring the curves editor back on to see exactly what we did. Now, we were just getting in and just adjusting the obviously the light and the dark in the shot. So let's take a look at another example, another great shot from Digital Juice's VideoTrax HD. And again, a shot of a mountain, a very nice looking shot. I'm just going to take this, drag it down here, drop it into my timeline. And what we're going to use for this one is the standard curves effect. Now I'm going to take this, I'm going to drag it right over here, drop it onto my shot. And you'll see now that once I select it, we're essentially right back to where we started. But in this case, what we want to do is we want to deal with color in the shot. We don't want to deal with just light and dark. So let's get in and let's do some adjustments. And basically all I'm going to do again is that simple S-curve. So let's do that. I'm going to take the toe. I'm just going to drag it down, crush sort of that area between the darkest area and the mids. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to bring the knee up a little bit, just like that. Now, obviously, please keep in mind, always be checking your waveform and vector scope so you can make sure you're staying within legal levels. But basically, what I've now done is I'm just going to move this sort of back to center. Is let's take a look at what it is now and what it was before. A very different look. Like, look how much color information we've now gotten back, not only into the mountain, but the sky, more importantly. I'm just going to say, let's show the effect. The sky is now a very nice, bright blue color. Whereas before, these clouds were really, you can't actually see it. It's kind of hard to see, but if you take a look, this smoke that's coming out of the mountain is actually taking up a lot of this blue space. But I don't want to show that. I want to show the fact that it's a nice, it's not, I don't know if it's sunny, but a nice clear day, obviously except for the clouds over there. But you can see just a major, major difference between one and the other. So you can see how between curved luma and curves, they work really similar to each other, but they obviously impact two completely different things. Okay, so let's come in, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, what I wanted to do here actually as well, is I just wanted to give you one other example because I happen to put the shot in here as well, another great shot. We're going to take this shot here, and again, I'm just going to use curved luma, take it in here. Now I want to show you how quick we can do this, okay? So we're going to take the toe, bring it down, take the knee, bring it up, and basically what we've got done now is just taking a shot that was a little bit washed out in the clouds and is now not washed out anymore. Let me just take the curves off here for a second. We'll just zoom back and we'll just drag through, and you can see just a completely different grade inside our footage. Looks great. Okay, last thing I want to show you with Naturous, and believe me, I'd like to get in and show you more, but obviously I only have a certain amount of time to get in and show this to you. That's why I encourage you, head on over to noiseindustries.com and download FxFactory. It's absolutely free. And don't forget, get in there and post questions, because we have questions. We have the Q&A at the end, so I want you to get in there and I want you to post some questions. I want to see if anybody out there can stump me, because that's always fun. I always love being stumped. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about the last thing I wanted to talk about with Naturous levels and curves. And that is, let me just come back to the events here, and that is I'm going to go back to my 2 blue shot. Because I know you can't possibly color correct this shot using Naturous curves, can you? Well, believe it or not, I actually can. What I'm going to do is just zoom in, not on my timeline, but on this shot here. And let's take RGB. I'm simply going to drag it over here, drop it in, and the only difference that I have now that I had before was now I actually have control over the different RGB channels. And what I'm going to do here is just come right down to not the bottom. I'm going to come down, and we're just going to adjust this ever so slightly to get rid of a lot of that blue that's in that shot. And you can see that's adding the blue back in. I'm just going to take the blue out a little bit. And basically what I've just done in about 2 seconds here, now obviously I get in and do more finite control, is take what was blue, and I'm just going to turn off the curves here for 1 second. And I've taken a lot of that blue out of that shot. And now what I could do if I wanted to is simply get in, I could throw the curves on, and I could do another color correction, making the colors really pop out. But you can see, literally in a span of 2 seconds, I jumped in and did that color correction using the curves RGB to get in and just adjust the blue aspect of this shot. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about Fixed Color, another great partner plugin from Noise Industries. I'm just going to delete the clip I'm working with here. We're going to navigate over here to my Fixed Color. And let's take this shot here of my boxer, and I'm going to take him, I'm going to drop him into my timeline. Again, we can navigate down. Now, Fix has a whole bunch of different partner product plugins. The one we're going to be dealing with is color. Now, what I'm going to do here, just drag things up a bit, because you're going to see that we actually have a bunch of different effects in here. We've got a great bleach bypass effect, one glow darks, selective saturation. Obviously, we can get in, select a color, and desaturate or add more saturation to that. Shift suppress and Techno 2 color. Now, the one I'm going to show you, obviously, just because I don't have time to get in and show you each one of them, it's not going to do it justice for me to get in and rush through it. The one I want to show you that stands out for me is Shift Suppress. I'm going to take Shift and Suppress, and I'm going to drag it over here, and I'm going to drop it onto my shot. You're going to see immediately now everything is sort of painted in blue. And what I'm going to do is I'm just simply going to select the shot. And once I select the shot, you're going to notice that the parameters appear over here in the inspector. Now, one thing that I actually really like about the fix effects, and you're going to see this with the FxFactory ones as well, is they're very simple, yet they create very, very cool and very different looks. And with the fix one, what we're going to do here is I have two options in here as far as the method goes. I can shift or I can suppress. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, what I'm basically doing right now is I'm shifting everything in this shot over to the color, what would you call that? I'm not really a color guy. It's more my wife that's the color girl, I guess. I'd sort of call that a purple color. So what we're actually doing is shifting all of the color in this shot over towards purple. What I can also do is I can say, well, you know what? I don't want to shift the color. I want to suppress that color. So you can see now that what I can do is actually just choose a color that I want to suppress in here. Now for me, what I want to do is I want to shift over to a certain color, just like this. And what we're going to do here is I'm just going to take both of my values down to nothing. The amount and the pre-saturation I'm actually going to put all the way back up. So basically what I have now is just the shot. And what I like to do with this is I actually like to come in and I like to bring my saturation almost down to the halfway point, even maybe a little bit more than the halfway point, just like that. And what I like to do is I'm just going to pick a color. Maybe we'll sort of, we'll stick with this color for now, and you'll see how we can adjust this in just a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start shifting everything over to this color, because what's important to keep in mind is that if I actually take the saturation out altogether and I start to add this color in, basically what we have is almost like an overlay of this color. And this is, believe it or not, an effect that I do all the time. And I'm going to show, let me just quickly show you what I mean. I'm just going to take the standard up here, blur from inside of Final Cut Pro, and I'll just take the Gaussian blur and we'll just drag it over here. Hold on a second here, there we go. And what I like to do is actually do the Gaussian blur first. And what I actually do is, this is actually, believe it or not, an effect that I do all the time. And what I'm always do, this is always like a 10-step process for me to create something like this, because it gets into doing transfer modes and all that type of stuff. But look at this, with shift and suppress, you can actually create a very cool background that you can put text and stuff like that over literally in seconds. And I just wanted to show you that quickly because I'm just going to delete Gaussian for a second. And right now I've actually got too much in here, because what I want to do is just add a bit of color back in here to show you that basically what I've done is taken this from a daylight boxing or a shot that has, you know, a very bright light over top of my boxer with this light beaming down on top of him, to basically a shot that looks like he's either boxing to moonlight, you know, maybe he's in the, you know, the arena and he's boxing and all there is over top of him is a skylight. And there's just light coming in from the skylight. Well, guess what? We've gotten in and we've taken something that looked, you know, I don't want to say staged because, you know, it looks like there's a light shining down on him, to taking it to create something that looks like it's actually very natural. And it was very, very simple to do with shift and suppress. And the great thing is that we can actually add a little bit more in there. If we want it to be a little bit darker, we can actually take away a little bit of the saturation very easily to even almost give it a day for night effect. Maybe it's night outside now and he's boxing. And there we go. So now instead of him being boxing, you know, with one bright light, guess what? Now it's nighttime and he's boxing in there by himself because it's 3 a.m. and the light's coming in from the skylight. So again, I hope you see that, you know, I am going through, you know, a lot of these plugins very quickly. And again, like I said, I encourage you to head on over to Noise Industry's website and download FxFactory Pro, because you get a free trial of all of these different plugins and you can see really how good they are. But you can see, you know, across the ones that I've shown you so far, you know, we've done very different things as far as the grading goes. And you know, in a lot of cases, a lot of these, you know, plugins do very well to complement each other because they do perform very different tasks that the other one doesn't do. So I don't want you to think of these, you know, all as sort of a one-trick pony that all kind of do, you know, oh, they all do your color correction, oh, or they all adjust your, you know, they work on your brights and darks. They don't all do that. They all do something very different from each other. So to sort of, you know, move on towards the end, what I want to do is I want to show you a couple of things inside of FxFactory Pro. And FxFactory Pro, now one thing I should point out about FxFactory Pro, and what I'm going to do is my clip is just rendering here, is let's just come back to the actual event that I have for FxFactory Pro here. There we go. And what I'm going to do is just delete this shot from my timeline here. And I'm going to delete that like such. And let's take, I don't know, let's just take the first shot here. We'll just drag it right down here. We'll drop it into our timeline. Now, what I should point out about FxFactory Pro is that I'm just going to navigate down here to the FxFactory Pro section. And FxFactory Pro is actually made up of more than just one category of plugins. There's actually a whole ton of plugins that you can see in here. Lots of different ones, from glows to, you know, sharpen effects, stylize, and all that type of stuff. Now, what we're going to be looking at in here is strictly the color correction plugins. And what we're going to do is just navigate back up here. Where are we here? Color correction. Perfect. There we go. So here's the color correction section, and you can see that we actually have about, looks like about 11 plugins in here that we have to choose from. And of course, again, we have things like a bleach bypass effect. And I'm going to show you a couple of them in here because, again, I want to show you that you shouldn't overlook a plugin because you think that it's very simple. And when you see the parameters inside of these effects, you're going to think to yourself, wow, well, this kind of seems too easy. And the best part is that in a lot of cases, your work shouldn't be, especially color grading, it shouldn't be a lot of work to create a grade. Creating a grade should be something that is, you know, relatively easy to get to. Where things get tricky is going from shot to shot, because obviously, like I said earlier, depending on the type of shot, you know, depending on the length of the shoot that the guys were out, or the team was out shooting, you know, you're going to get different lighting variations coming back, and that's where things get tricky, because the grade that you have for the shot, you know, shot A, the grade that you're going to need for shot, you know, Z or Z, pardon me for all my American friends out there, the shot for grade Z is going to be completely different because the sun is changing in the sky. So keep that in mind, you know, when you're color grading. You're not just going to want to keep taking the presets and just apply. It's going to be, go to the first shot, create the look. Go to the next shot, take that look, apply it to that shot, tweak it a little bit. Tweak the next one a little bit, and tweak the next one a little bit. And that's how you're going to have to keep going to do your color grades. Okay, but let's just talk about a couple in here. And the first one I want to talk about, believe it or not, is, I don't know if I necessarily call this a color grade effect, but I just wanted to throw it out there quickly, is the vignette effect. I'm just going to take the vignette effect and drag it on here. And I know you're probably thinking, why do I need a vignette effect? You know, we've already got one inside of you know, Final Cut Pro 10. Well, the one thing I actually like about this vignette effect, as opposed to the one in Final Cut Pro 10, is the fact that I actually have the option of what type of shape I want. Do I want it to be an oval, or do I want it to be a rectangle? And now we can actually get in here and let's adjust. There we go. Let's adjust this here. And you can see that you can actually get in and almost create old film looks with this. How we can get in, have the rounded edges. You know, we don't need to be that dark. We just wanted to have it like such. But, you know, I just wanted to point this out, you know, as another option inside of the color correction section, because it does give us an extra element that in most cases is something that if you didn't apply this effect, you'd have to go in and create it in something like Photoshop. So let's move on and let's talk about a couple others here. And the one that I want to talk about here is Crush Color. Let me just come back. I'm just going to delete Vignette here. There we go. And what I'm going to do here is navigate back to FxFactory Pro. We're going to simply come down to Crush Color. And you can see what happens immediately. As soon as I go over Crush Color, it gives us a preview of exactly what we're going to see. And I'm simply going to take Crush Color. I'm going to drag it right over here. I'm going to drop it onto my clip. And you're going to see right away that we now have a new look. And let's take a look at the before and the after. And again, like I said, the one thing that I love about these effects is not a lot of parameters, but they create a very different look. And let's just crush things in the background. And you can see that I can actually bring the highlights up to create a very, very overexposed look. Very nice. And what I'm going to do now is simply take this, and what I want to do is to show you. Now, these were all shot probably not at the same time. They were probably shot over different times. So what I'm going to do, let me just make sure I grab the entire shot here, is come back. We'll take this. I'm going to drag it and drop it onto my timeline. And again, what I'm going to do, you can see 0.07, 0.63. We'll just take Crush Color here, drag it and drop it. Again, 0.07, 0.63. Let's make sure I actually select the next one. There we go, 0.63. So again, Now, like I said before, you can see what's going on here is my guy here is a little bit overexposed. It's not the exact same exposure here that I had in the next shot. So what I'm going to need to do is just back off on that a bit. And what I want to do is actually just crush the lows a bit. And this is a perfect example of how, color correcting things from shot to shot, is very important. So you can see I'll click from one to the other, and I think I just need to bring the highs down a little bit. Very nice. Okay, there we go. So you can see color grade from one to the other, now more matches than it did before. Very cool. Okay, now the last one that I want to show you is probably my favorite one. I'm just going to delete crush color here. And it's actually channel swap. Now I know people are probably thinking channel swap. Well, how is that going to benefit me in anything that I'm doing? I'm just going to delete the effect right there. How is channel swap going to help me? And it actually is going to help you create a very cool look. And I want to show you, and I'm going to use this shot here as an example, but I'm going to show you how you don't necessarily need to just stick with a shot like these guys that are BMXing. What I'm going to do is take channel swap, and you're going to notice as soon as I drag across it, nothing really happens. Now, why does nothing happen? I'm just going to take channel swap. I'm going to drag it over here and drop it. Because right now, my channels are mapped to the proper channels. You'll see red channel, red. Green channel, green. Blue channel, blue. Fairly self-explanatory. But what if I actually wanted to get in and I want to change one of these? Most people say, oh, this is how most people work with this. Like, I want to say, okay, let's map the red to blue. Oh, well, that doesn't look very good. And then they sort of dismiss this plugin and go on to another one. But what I like to do is come back here. I'm going to set this to red. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to come down and I'm going to swap the blue source. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to swap the blue source. I'm going to swap the blue source to green and watch what happens right away. Well, now what's happened is that the green has almost canceled itself out and created a very, very different look. Very cool. It's almost like a bleach bypass effect. And you can see I really don't have to do anything else. And the cool thing is that if I come back here, I'll just pick this other shot here. We'll do the exact same thing. Channel swap. Okay, come in. We're going to swap the blue to be green. Again, you can see everything cancels itself out. Let's just zoom back here. But our guy still stays the same color. Very cool. Now, what I thought to myself was I wonder how this would look actually doing it with something different, like completely different. So let's come back. And did I have the surfing dude in the first section? Yes, I did. Let's take surfing dude here. Let's drop him in there. What I'm going to do again, channel swap. We'll take channel swap. We'll drag it over here. We'll drop it. I'm going to take the source. I'm going to swap the blue source to be green again. And you can see now, again, a very different look, but a very cool look. This is a very bleach bypass look. We see that our guy still looks very similar to the way he did before. We really haven't changed anything, but obviously because we got some green in the shorts, we got some blue in here, we're swapping these channels out, and you can see, again, a very different, very cool look that we created using channel swap, a very simple and very effective plugin. So I hope, again, like I said earlier, that one thing that you take away from this is that not only is the color board inside of Final Cut Pro 10 something that you don't necessarily need to be afraid of, because you take a look at it, especially if you're coming from Final Cut Pro 7, it's very different and it's not the same. But a lot of cases, you need to sit back and you need to think about what you're doing before you do it. You need to look at your footage and say, okay, what is going on in this footage? Well, it looks like the highlights are a little bit too blue because I can see that in the whites of everything. Or it looks like, inside the dark of those trees, everything's a little bit too green. So maybe I need to get in and back off the green a bit. But guess what? At the end of the day, you're only going to be able to take color grading and color correction so far inside of Final Cut Pro 10. And you're going to need to go and you're going to need to look at third-party plugins to help you get the looks or the grades that you want to get. So, taking a look at the ones from FxFactory Pro, will definitely pay off for you because, like I said, there's, a few gems in there like what I've shown you today. And like I said, in certain ones like, Yano Box Moods, it introduces the color wheels back into Final Cut Pro 10. In Naturous levels, you could see how simple it was to get in and adjust the brights and darks and get in and create that color look. And you saw inside a fixed color, how simple it was to get in and create things like day for night looks, which is something that I see people wanting to do all the time. And again, then you just using the standard plugins inside of FxFactory Pro, you can get in and there's some real gems in there like channel swap, like we just saw, and even the crush color effect to get in and really create some very, very cool looks and some cool grades. Okay, so at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it back to Marcelo, and we can hopefully get some stumping questions being asked.
Kevin, stick around with us because it is price time now, and we're going to be giving away some really, really cool prizes. So one lucky attendee will win a copy of Yano Box Moods, a unique color grading plugin with full screen interface for Final Cut Pro 10, Motion, and After Effects. You can find out more about it at yanobox.com. And the winner of Yano Box Moods is David Courage. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly. If I didn't, my apologies. David Courage, Courage. So congratulations to David for winning that prize. Our next prize, one lucky attendee will win a copy of Naturous Levels and Curves, a plugin that helps you take control of your footage with the power of curves applied in film log space. You can find out more about it at naturous.com. And the winner of that is George Stoffberg. George Stoffberg, that's Stofberg. Congratulations to George. And yet another prize. One lucky attendee will win a copy of FxColor, a complete set of tools for styling and manipulating color of moving footage and still images. You can find out more about it at fixware.com. And the winner of the FxColor is Kathleen Corcoran. Kathleen Corcoran. Corcoran. So congratulations to Kathleen for winning that cool prize as well. And finally, one lucky attendee will win a copy of FxFactory Pro, which powers hundreds of visual effects for Final Cut Pro, Motion, and Adobe After Effects. You can find out more about it at noiseindustries.com. And the winner of the FX Pro or FxFactory Pro is Monica Camba. Monica Camba, Camba. So congratulations to David, George, Kathleen, and Monica for winning a whole bunch of cool prizes. I do want to remind you to continue tweeting and make sure you follow Filmmaking Dude. Don't forget to use the hashtag #FilmmakingWebinars. That's how we'll know who's tweeted. At the end of the day today, 2 random followers will be picked, and each one will win one unmanned webinar from us. So good luck. Also remember to like us on Facebook to receive updated information about our content. Facebook.com/filmmakingwebinars. Also, I want to remind you that we have tons of on-demand webinars available for you to purchase on all sorts of filmmaking-related topics. Just visit ondemand.filmmakingwebinars.com for more cool topics. Also, I want to remind you that you never have to pay for our free live webinars. Just visit live.filmmakingwebinars.com to register for as many as you want, and we have many webinars scheduled already and many more to come. But it is time now for Q&A, sponsored by Noise Industries, makers of FxFactory. So thank you again to Noise Industries. You know, one of the interesting question here, is there a way you can just give us a quick wrap-up of what's new color-wise in Final Cut Pro versus Final Cut Pro 10 versus Final Cut Pro 7 or even 10.03?
Well, I mean, looking at it from version 7 to version 10, I mean, the one thing that version 7 had that version 10 doesn't have is the color wheels, and this is something I talked about, earlier, and that was sort of a big thing inside of Final Cut Pro 7, and Apple has decided to obviously, go the way of the color board, which, like I said before, I'm not a huge fan of the color board, and the only reason that I'm not a big fan of the color board, don't get me wrong, it's still obviously a tool to get into your color adjustments, but I always look at it from the standpoint of, if I'm learning a program because, let's say editing is what I want to do for a living, the problem is that if I learn this and then I go and I sit down in front of a media composer, the color correction is going to be completely different. If I go and sit in front of Premiere, color correction is going to be completely different. That's why one thing I mentioned that I liked, about Yano Box Moods is that it introduces the color wheels back into Final Cut Pro 10, which for me, coming from Final Cut Pro 7, is a way that I'm accustomed to working. So, for me, it's all about not only just working inside the confines of Final Cut Pro 10, it's about, when you get hired to go and do a job on another application, you want to make sure that you can sit down, you can open, you're not going to know everything about everything, but it's about becoming familiar with things. And at least with Final Cut Pro 7, you had the color wheels, you could jump into something like Media Composer, okay, there are the color wheels again, this is something that I've seen in Final Cut Pro 7, so I can at least start to work my way through it.
Yep, cool. Do you typically apply a color grade before color correcting individual shots, or do you color correct first and then apply the grade?
In most cases, I'll sort of do things as a two-pass process. What I'll do is I'll go through and I will make sure that, I'll get in there, and because the thing that's important to keep in mind about a grade, and another great example is, let's say we were talking about presets, okay? What is a preset? A preset is a predefined look. Well, the problem is that if my shot already doesn't look the way the shot looked when I created that grade, it's not going to look the same when I apply it to that shot. So normally what I'll do is I'll sit down, and color correcting and color grading is I'll say the two last things you do besides your audio mix. The first thing you do is you sit down, you edit your show. Your show is done, finished, locked. The client says they love it. They're not going to change a thing. That's why you normally say, by the way, once we get to this point, anything that I'm going to change is going to cost you more money. And what you're going to do is once you have everything locked down, you're then going to go back and you're going to sit down and you're going to say, okay, I know that everything now is correct. I know that all of the light levels the way that they should be. I know that all the colors look the way that they should be. Everything is now even across the board. Okay, now that I have everything even across the board, let's create a grade for this first shot. Because in a lot of cases, what you can do is sit down, create that grade for the first shot. Then you can take it and apply it all down your timeline. And in most cases, it's a matter of just going back in and doing minor tweaks. Because maybe a car drives by and the iris on the camera changes, or who knows, maybe the sun goes behind the clouds for 30 seconds, but that take was the only take that you had of the talent getting the lines right. So once you've at least done that, but by doing it this way, you've essentially cut your work time in half, because if you're going through and attempting to color correct and color grade at the same time, everything's going to take you 10 times as long.
Right, definitely. Is there a paste attributes function to copy filters from shot to shot?
That's a good question. Let's try it. To be perfectly honest, I've never actually tried it. Let's see, do I have a... Now, obviously, using the color adjustment, there would not be, because right now the color is actually applied, or the color is actually attached to the shot. But like I had actually mentioned before, if we actually come into the grade here, let's just show it here, and I step into the color board, remember, down here at the bottom we have our presets. By the way, my favorite feature of the presets is the fact that BMXing is actually the one that I created right down here after Winter Sun, right where it should be, B after W. But like I said before, we can actually come in and, for this shot, if I happen to use, the BMXing grade that I created, which obviously it's not the same because that was for color correction, I can obviously just come in here, we step in, oh yeah, no problem, we're just going to come in, we're going to apply this here. But let's take a look at the channel swap effect that we had, and let's actually try it. And what I'll do is just take another shot here, drop it in. So with our surfing dude here, what we're going to do here is I'm just going to step back. Let's try that again. Let's step back. Please step back. There we go. And I'm just going to reset the color grade here. And I've got channel swap on there, so let's select it. Command-C to copy. Let's go to the next shot. Okay. Paste it. No, doesn't seem to like to do it. So I guess I'll say the answer is no.
Yeah, I think you can copy all the actual attributes and then paste all of them, but you can't, like in Final Cut Pro 7, where you could actually paste separate.
Copy and paste effects doesn't look like it's happy with that.
Right. Okay, let's see. Do you have any advice for color correcting faces?
Any advice for color? Well, let's put it this way, and people always laugh when I say this, buy a clapboard. And people say, buy a clapboard. Why would I want a clapboard? I'll tell you why you want a clapboard. Because a clapboard has two important colors on it that you're going to need when you're doing, first of all, your color correction, black and white. Because the great thing with the clapboard is, and what you'll see in most cases is that on the clapboard as well, you're going to see a whole different range of colors that are on there as well. So what's going to happen is that your camera's going to be on your let's say you're even doing a close-up, because one thing I always do when I'm first of all color correcting before I move on to color grading is I'm going to find three things in the shot. Well, let's put it this way, I'm going to hope to find three things in the shot. I'm going to hope to find a black, a gray, and a white, but in most cases I'll settle for a black and a white, because in most cases the gray I can sort of get in and fake. Now, with the clapboard, if you're doing a close-up on somebody, guess what? You might only be looking at their face or a very close-up shot of their face. So what are you going to use as a reference when you want to get in and you want to actually, correct the shot so that it looks right? Well, guess what? If you stick a clapboard up in someone's face and you say, this is Joe Blow's shot, take one, clap, guess what you now have? You now have a black and white in front of the person's face with the camera color corrected, or the camera white balanced the way it was white balanced with all the lights on it. So now you have a point of reference to start with, which in most cases is what you need. It's the point of reference. Like I said, in most cases what I like to do is I drop black and white when I do my color correcting. So in this case, at least, if I don't have black and white inside my shot, I can create white and black inside my shot before I even have to worry about the action of the director.
I see. That's pretty good tip. So, Kevin, unfortunately, we are completely out of time. I do want to thank you for doing our webinar today and also for doing our podcast, which is coming right up. So thank you for doing all of that.
No problem, Marcelo. Thank you again for having me.
I also want to thank Noise Industries for sponsoring our webinar today and for providing some really great prizes to give away. Most important, I want to thank each and every one of you for attending our show. I sincerely hope you enjoyed it. Remember to attend our free live webinar next week, Storytelling Techniques for Marketing, Corporate, and Indie Filmmakers, where Norman Holland will show you techniques for creating engaging stories regardless of the type of story you are telling. Just visit filmmakingwebinars.com to register for it. So until our next webinar, I am your host, Marcelo Lewin. Cheers, everybody.